Yeah, so we're just talking about how today is the day of reflection. So we do the Fusatsu ceremony, and we typically choose one of the 10 Bodhisattva precepts to look at in particular and sit with for the day or the week or however you want to practice with it. So the precept we're looking at today is the sixth Bodhisattva precept, which is not speaking of others' errors and faults. And just to kind of start that conversation, I will offer that not speaking also includes not thinking. So we're just kind of looking at all versions of language and how it shows up. Not speaking or thinking of others' errors and faults. And I will also offer that others includes myself. Because from the perspective of this selfless one of the universe, then this concept of little Chowa here is kind of an other in a way. So that's kind of an interesting thing to sit with when I talk about myself or think about myself. I'm actually talking about someone else. Because my true self can't be limited to just this little impermanent body. So we'll just kind of start with that. And then I also wanted to just say that this precept is particularly resonant for me right now because I am super geeking out on the Four Agreements. How many have read the Four Agreements? No, the Four Agreements is a book that came out in 1997, written by Don Miguel Ruiz. I'm not super familiar with his whole bio, but it was recommended to me. I mean, it's been recommended to me for decades, and I've always resisted it because everyone likes it. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna read it. But someone finally gave me the ultimate recommendation that made me pick it up, and it has definitely changed my life. The Four Agreements. It's definitely rooted in some very familiar teachings and perspectives to those of us with a Buddhist experience, very similar. But yeah, he basically, the basic gist of it is we are all one manifestation of light, and yet we are given this whole network of beliefs and ideas. And if we are able to step outside of those beliefs or let go of those beliefs and ideas and follow these four agreements, then you will be free and happy and loving. And, that's kind of where it breaks off from Buddhism a little bit, because it's like, do this and you will be better, which isn't exactly the vibe anyway. And so one thing that he says, he's very clear that the first agreement, which is be impeccable with your word. Be impeccable with your word. He says that if you just do this one agreement, that's kind of all you need. It kind of informs the other three. And if you just commit to practicing this one agreement, be impeccable with your word, then you will experience liberation and a huge shift in your life, and everything will be great. I mean, there's some pretty flowery language in there, which may or may not be helpful, and maybe a little bit sidestepping things like trauma and oppressive systems. So, but anyway, we don't have to go too deep into that. And so as I've been sitting with and reading and really working with this, be impeccable with your word, it just is so obviously related to this precept of not speaking or thinking of others' errors and faults. So what does this mean to be impeccable with your word? This in itself is kind of a koan to sit with. And I like the way that Don Miguel Ruiz, puts it. He says, impeccable coming from the root word, I guess it's Latin, for sin, right? In Spanish, pecado is a sin. Um, so how do we not be sinful with our thoughts and words and language? What does that mean? And I really like that because it doesn't mean that we never talk negative, right? That's not the point. We have a duty, almost a responsibility, to point out negative things, harmful things, and we'll get more into that later. But how do we talk about those things? That's where the sinful part comes in. The difference between, God, what an awful asshole, and, man, they're making really bad decisions, and it's probably coming from a place of hurt. How can I step up and try to mitigate these bad decisions? Isn't that, like, does everyone feel the difference there? How one might be a little more sinful. God, that asshole's such a stupid, versus, man, what a bad decision. How can we work to stop that? And so, this isn't I'm not trying to espouse any kind of philosophy or logical explanation here. I'm just here to tell you that since I've worked on this impeccability with my word, my life really has changed. There's just no doubt about it. And, Buddhism talks about it too. We talk about right speech, and we have these precepts of not talking of others' errors and faults, but for some reason, this particular wording from this book, The Four Agreements, really just hit me and allowed me to kind of go deeper into this work of the power of my word, and how making a shift towards supportive and uplifting language, even when it's coming from a place of anger and reaction, it can really make a huge difference, not only in how I feel, but how I treat people and how effective I am. So yeah, this impeccability, this not speaking of others' errors and faults, it doesn't mean that we don't point out when people have made mistakes or when harm is being caused. I know that's kind of what the language is, and some of the ancient language is even more clear. They're like, just don't talk about it when someone makes a mistake. And we know that that's not right. It's more about shifting to this practice of, how do I show up when harm is caused, when someone has made a mistake, when I've made a mistake. Because how we approach it can really make or break whether that mistake or error or fault or harm actually gets addressed in a healthy way. So let's take a look at, usually when we study the precepts, we use three main wordings of this precept. One is from the modern era, put together by the Zen Peacemakers, which is a group that was started by Bernie Glassman, who was kind of our founder's teacher, and they came up with their own wording for the precept. And then if you go back about 700 or 800 years, you get to Dogen, and Dogen wrote a piece called the Kyoju Kaimon, which offers his language around the precepts. And then if you go back another 700 or 800 years, you get to Bodhidharma, who was an Indian Buddhist who is credited with bringing Buddhism to China, and he has his own version of the precepts. So it's kind of fun to look at like modern era, 800 years ago, 1600 years ago, and see how these same precepts, which kind of exist across Buddhist spectrum, Buddhist lineages, how they're worded differently. So the modern era Zen peacemaker is one, not talking about others' errors and faults. I will accept what each moment has to offer. I will acknowledge responsibility for everything in my life. So that's kind of interesting. To start off with, I will accept what each moment has to offer, in the context of not speaking of others' errors and faults. Which I guess implies that if I am gossiping, or I am blaming myself or blaming others or hating others, then that implies that I'm kind of not accepting what that moment has to offer. Acceptance, such an interesting practice. And I remember, I don't know if he still feels this way, but Echo Sensei used to always talk about how he sees enlightenment, this big special thing we think of as enlightenment, as simply acceptance. Total, complete, open acceptance. And acceptance, of course, doesn't mean justification or just letting it go. We don't just accept when injustice happens, or we don't just say, well, I guess it's just injustice and that's what it is. Accepting is to see it for what it really is. And when people harm others, it's because they are harmed. Hurt people hurt people. I know we've all heard this and say this. But to really act from that and to really cultivate that, to accept something instead of blame and judge and shame and put down, accepting someone's ignorance, accepting someone's folly and incompetence, allows us to approach it with more love and understanding. And even when something is really harmful, it just seems, in my experience, I quote Daryl Davis all the time, the guy who has gotten people to leave the Ku Klux Klan by showing them love and understanding, not by hating them and yelling at them and calling them names. It just seems to be that when we approach the problems of our world with acceptance, love, and understanding, we just become more effective in making change. So this acceptance isn't about justifying and just saying, oh, well, that's how it is. It's actually about being a better warrior. And then accepting responsibility. Or what does it say? Acknowledging responsibility. So again, that doesn't mean that someone bullies me and I say, oh, well, I guess it's my fault, right? That's obviously an abusive relationship. No, when we can really accept what's actually going on with an impeccable word, then we can take responsibility for making a change, making a boundary, leaving a situation, telling someone that's not okay. That's taking responsibility. Or very often it is on me. So just to be open to what is my responsibility here, right? What if that's our first reaction? Someone makes a mistake or is at fault for something. What would my life be like if my first reaction is, what's my responsibility here? I accept that there was a mistake made. What's my responsibility in this? As opposed to, God, what an ignorant, stupid head. Or whatever your sinful words may be. So that's the Zen peacemaker's language around this precept. Then we go back 800 years to what Dogen said. His wording of this precept is, within the Buddha Dharma, it is the same way, the same Dharma, the same realization, the same practice. Do not speak of the shortcomings of others. Do not destroy the way. It's interesting. So I think there's another translation where it says, we are the same way, the same Dharma, the same realization, and the same practice. So I don't want to sit here and try to like describe or explain why this makes sense. I just want to offer the opportunity to take on that practice. Someone who believes differently from you. Someone who acts in a way that is not aligned with your values. Someone who's straight up mean to you. Someone who's projecting onto you. All of these ways that people harm, have fault, make errors, mistakes. What would happen if you met that with, we are the same way? We are on the same path. We share this one moment together. This tiny little blip of history in the grand scheme of this universe. We are on it together. And speaking ill, thinking ill of you is speaking ill of me. And when you harm me, you're actually harming yourself. So when you bully me, I feel sorry for you. I mean, I gotta tell you, I look at the White House and the people in charge of some really corrupt and messed up systems, and the initial feeling is anger, but it's followed up by a feeling of sympathy, because these are hateful people. And I really, really, truly believe that they are suffering because of these actions. There's just no way about it. If I hurt you, I hurt me. If I speak and think badly of you, and go and tell somebody how awful they are, or even tell myself how awful and stupid and stuck in their ways they are, I'm hurting myself. I am. I feel it. There's just no, so clear. We are on this same way together. And so I just invite you. I know it's hard. It's really hard to work with that. But I just invite you to open up to that. And see what happens. Just see what happens. How much more effective and present we can be as we try to work things out, as errors and mistakes are made. So then we go back another 800 years and we get to Bodhidharma. Lost him. So yeah, Bodhidharma lived in the 5th and 6th century, we think. And he was an Indian guy, and he traveled to China, which was a pretty perilous journey back then, and was famous for getting to China. He meets with the emperor. The emperor doesn't, they have some, kind of Buddhist-y interaction, And after that interaction, Bodhidharma finds a temple and faces the wall for 9 years, or so the legend goes. Um, just trying to establish this practice of Zazen in a new land. And then eventually, Chinese folks start coming to him, they hear about him, and they learn from him, and the Dharma spreads from there. But he was a super intense guy. I think he was the guy who cut off his eyelids. Is that right? Yeah, he cut off his eyelids so that he could just be in Zazen all the time. You know, just really intense, austere ancestor of our lineage. And a pretty good writer, or at least things that were accredited to him, are pretty powerful stuff. So his interpretation of this precept starts out, self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the faultless Dharma, not speaking of others' faults is called the precept of not speaking of others' shortcomings. So yeah, he starts off all the precepts with self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. Love that. That could be your one koan or mantra for your whole life. And I would assume it would be a gift that keeps on giving. Because each one of those words is kind of a mystery. Self, nature, is inconceivably wondrous. I mean, literally, each one of those words is like a Rorschach or a koan or a parable. What is self? What is one's nature? That's a big one, especially with all this talk these days about follow your intuition. Like, what the hell is intuition? Where is the line between intuition and conditioning? So hard to see. Is, that implies a reality. What is reality? And then, of course, inconceivable, non-graspable, wonder, wondrous. So yeah, what a beautiful sentence that just, puts mystery on top of mystery. And I don't know. I expect we might see a lot of benefit in our world if we all approached our lives with a little more mystery. Or a lot more mystery. All of this language we use in Zen, nature, inconceivable, wondrous, not knowing, letting go, it's all creating this environment for a continuous practice of just opening, opening, opening. Including opening to when being open is not appropriate, and you need to close that door. So, setting up this vibe of inconceivable wonder, he says, in the faultless Dharma. The faultless Dharma. This to me is huge. I think this was one of my earliest, like as a kid, the first thing that really jogged my practice open. When I really asked myself, like, at what point can we blame someone? Because if you look at every mistake that someone makes, or every transgression, I just feel like you can always go further with, well, it was caused by this, which was caused by that, which was caused by that, which was caused by that, caused by that. Which is why our our carceral system of locking people up is just the most counterproductive, harmful, antiquated, stupid, if I can be impeccable with my words, system that we have. And now that we know more about intergenerational, inherited trauma and conditioning, and once we really get in touch with the law of karma and how deep and expansive cause and effect goes, then when can you really blame someone? Even if, I mean, take the worst example. If someone, let's say you have a roommate and they never wash the dishes, and you ask them over and over, wash the dishes, please wash the dishes, please wash the dishes. And on the 80th time, they still don't wash the dishes. Can we blame them? Are they worthy of blame then? Or are they maybe suffering from some kind of conditioning that just does not allow them to act in alignment with their own values? Self-sabotage. The more we find out about psychology and how trauma works, it just seems so clear to me that no one individual is at fault for anything. And it doesn't mean that we can't work together to try to make boundaries and work towards being okay with doing the dishes. Doesn't mean we can't get better together. But I think the best way to get better, to work on our mistakes and errors and faults, is to approach each other knowing that none of us are to blame. We're all just working out this beginningless karma, this beginningless cause and effect. And so the idea that someone is born in a certain neighborhood and is forced to join a gang and commits crimes, and then we throw them in prison because they're at fault, it's just madness. I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional around that. It's just madness. It makes no sense whatsoever. So yeah, in this faultless Dharma, where all of our mistakes are just a product of beginningless and endless cause and effect, then not speaking of others' faults is the precept of refraining from talking of others' shortcomings. So yeah, there's no such thing as fault. There's just this moment that we can take responsibility for. Whether that's bringing something up, whether that's finding my own responsibility in the situation, whether that's making boundaries, whether that's stepping away, leaving a situation, whatever it is. If we can encounter the situation from this place of faultlessness, inconceivable wonder about mistakes, I think we'll see that our word becomes more impeccable, our relationships become more whole and healthy, and we can take care of each other. Taking care of each other, including myself, instead of just going around talking about how bad other people are and how good people are who agree with me. Just see what happens. Just see what happens if you can really live with this precept moment to moment, right? I mean, that's the thing. I've been sitting with don't speak of others' errors and faults for a long time. But then getting a fresh perspective with this be impeccable with your word, it was amazing how subtle and how nuanced every moment I was judging people, comparing myself to people, blaming people, hating people. I mean, just amazing what I uncovered when I really made the commitment to look at how I speak of others' errors and faults, including myself, obviously. I mean, the self-loathing that came out was, endless. And so, yeah, how do we take care of mistakes and faults from a place of impeccability? So really powerful practice. And I'll just end by sharing something important for the Zen Center here, that in the spirit of dealing with mistakes and errors in a whole, healthy, impeccable way, we do have an official grievance procedure that we spent a lot of time on developing. And you can find that written out in its entirety in our Sangha Sutra, which is on the website. I'm happy to point anyone in that direction. And also to highlight that we have this group called the Hear Circle, hearing, ethics, and reconciliation, which is basically a place to take your grievances with someone or something at the Zen Center. We encourage everyone to speak directly first. That's like the first step of grievance and dealing with others' errors. But if it's uncomfortable to talk in person, face to face, directly, or if you talk directly and it's still just, a log jam and you can't really get past it, then we have this circle of people who are like affiliated with the Zen Center, but not necessarily like practicing members. They are not in any position of power at the Zen Center. They're just kind of neutral-ish people who care about the Zen Center and want to be available to try to be a neutral party in working out grievances. So I think it's a really powerful resource that we have. So yeah, I hope obviously that there are no grievances, and if there are, that we can talk about them and meet in a loving way to work through them. But just to be really clear, I like to repeat every now and then that we have this resource available as well for a safe space to engage with whatever's coming up. Spiritual practice, spiritual community is a very intimate thing. It's beautiful and it's powerful and it can be really sensitive and things come up. So yeah, I just hope that everyone takes advantage of the various resources we have to continue in a safe way as errors and faults happen. Thank you for listening.